Welcome to part 2 of my 4-part Breath of the Wild series. Last time we took a look at the Hyrule Field theme, which kind of represents the sparse and ambient piano that runs throughout the game's soundtrack. This week we're going to take a look at a piece that represents the more bombastic side of the soundtrack, Breath of the Wild's main theme. I'm not going to be coy, I absolutely love this piece. Putting aside the inventive orchestration and the larger-than-life melodies, it's ridiculously well-structured, and like much of my favorite video game music, it's constructed out of only a few motifs. For this tune, I think we have to start at the end and then work our way back. See, the first half of the tune is really just build-up for the main section, and with the amount of foreshadowing in it, I'd be surprised if Manaka Kataoka didn't write the main part first and then fill in the beginning after. So, let's take a look at the main section of the song. First of all, it's extremely dramatic. These huge leaps emphasizing the 1 and 5 are vaguely reminiscent of Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Field theme and the original Zelda theme. Second of all, the theme is meticulously structured. See, first we have our 2-bar main motif. Now, in classical music, it's not uncommon to create a musical sentence by extending your main motif with 2 shortened variations of that motif. Here, the 2-bar motif is followed up by 2 1-bar variations, one bringing the melody down from its high, and the next walking it back up to where it started with this really cool flat 2 Phrygian cadence. This whole 4-bar phrase is then stretched into 8 through a more drastic variation. First off, this already intense octave leap is replaced with a whopping 10th jump, and then we borrow from the parallel major key in a clever reversal of the Zelda norm. Most main Zelda themes are in a major key, but borrow chords from the parallel minor key. I like to think of this as a representation of a hero facing adversity. Even though you know at the end of the tune or the story the hero is going to come out on top, he still has to get in danger for it to be exciting when he does. In Breath of the Wild, though, this main theme is in a minor key and borrows from the parallel major key, which could represent the situation in the game. Unlike most Zelda titles, when we start this game, Ganon has already pretty much won. Hyrule is already in ruins, and Zelda's already captured, but there's a glimmer of hope that our hero can still save the day. This kind of mode mixture is really uncommon, so it might be a little jarring to the ear, but anyways, this whole 8-bar theme is then made part of an even bigger structure, as when it's repeated, the last melodic phrase is inverted to a walk up as opposed to a walk down. Even this small of a variation can alleviate any boredom you might get from repeating a phrase too many times. Afterwards, we get a 4-bar phrase that's built out of a variation on our main motif. These next few bars are kind of filler, but the way they use an ascending fifth, the inverse of the descending fifth from the main motif, at least ties them back to the main theme a little bit. The last cadence is a classic flat 6 to flat 7 to 1 walk-up that brings us up to the C5 chord. Leaving out the third of the chord keeps the tonality ambiguous to some degree. We've been bouncing between our major and minor keys so much that it's not obvious which one this chord is implying. It seems to say, will our hero come out on top, or will he fall to the darkness? I guess you just have to buy the game and find out. Nintendo, you crafty bastards. You may remember this technique being used in the Hyrule Field theme to achieve a similarly ambiguous effect. Now, check out the 2 bars leading up to this. They seem like they kind of come out of left field a bit, not really having anything to do with any of the melodic motifs we've talked about up until now, but they actually call back to the first half of the song that we skipped. Take note of this last melodic move, a leap up of a 6th, then down of a 2nd. That's going to be important, but for now, check out this bar. This contour is a callback to the very first bar of the piece, or rather the first bar of the melody. You'll hear it right after this 2-bar intro where these high, alternating fourths and fifths on the piano set the mood. This crescendo leads us into the first section of the piece, a somber 8-bar piano solo with some light background from a choir. It's a simple melody, antecedent consequent period, pretty clearly outlining an F minor before moving to the relative A flat major. One point of interest though is the change between the first bar and the fourth bar. At first we get the sharp 4 if you think in the key of A flat, but the second time around we get the natural 4. It's such a subtle change I didn't notice it at first, but it already strikes just a little bit of ambiguity into the tonality of the piece, keeping us from getting too stable of a footing right off the bat. This section moves into an abrupt modulation to the key of B major. Although we don't actually hear a B chord throughout this section, it's heavily implied by this 4-5-3-6 movement. This part is actually so cool. You might not notice it at first because it's much more chill, scored for flute and strings, and in a different key, but it's actually the first 4 bars of the main theme flipped around. That is some primo foreshadowing, baby! The next 4 bars bounce a 3-note motif around the orchestra before building into the next section. What's cool about this, though, is that these 3 notes are the inverse of the 3rd bar of the main theme. It's the same as the last phrase of the whole piece! So it's even more foreshadowing! Oh man, we also get this really cool cadence as this big, bright major 2 chord chromatically approaches the D sus that opens the next section. This section might not be immediately recognizable either due to the vastly different orchestration and key change, but it's actually the same as our first 8 bars, only this time in the key of C major instead of A flat. Notice that the sharp 4 natural 4 distinction is still there too. This moves into another transition section to pump us up for the big main theme we've been foreshadowing up until now. It's a little less straightforward harmonically, but it's basically a rising melody outlining the key of F sharp or G flat major over a chromatically descending bass line. It's built off of this 1-bar motif that I think could be a variation on the 4th bar of the main theme, but that might be a little bit of a stretch. The contour is the same, with a small leap down walking back up to the start, but the rhythm and interval structure are just different enough that it could go either way. I mean, the 3rd bar of the main theme was the basis for the last transition section, so it would make sense to base this transition section off of the 4th bar, but if that was Kataoka's rationale, she was being incredibly subtle. Anyways, this builds up into a tense D diminished that moves to a big B flat sus to B flat, setting up a flat 7-1 cadence in our main theme's key of C minor. There are definitely less convoluted ways of modulating from C major to C minor, but hey, it definitely hypes up the song, so I'm not complaining. I just can't get enough of stuff like this. It's like a fractal or something. This one interval got stretched into 2 bars, and then the 2 bars got stretched into 4 bars, and then that got stretched into an 8-bar phrase, and then that got put into a 16-bar call and response sort of structure, and then all the other parts of the song got built out of motifs that were already written into the main part. It's just so cohesive and meticulously put together. That's not to say anything about the orchestration. The wide variety of colors used from section to section not only creates the feeling that we're being transported to a new place as we're transported from key to key, but it adds so effectively to the one huge crescendo that makes up the song. I love how they gave the main melody first to the erhu, a traditional 2-stringed Chinese instrument. I've heard this instrument on a couple Mario Kart 8 tracks before, and it sounded killer there too. The Breath of the Wild soundtrack actually uses quite a few traditional Asian instruments, but I'll get into that in part 3. Anyway, that was part 2 of my 4-part series on Breath of the Wild's soundtrack. Now at this point in the video, I know what you're probably thinking. How can I make sure I never see any of this guy's videos again? Well, the first thing you gotta do is make sure not to subscribe. Definitely don't hit that little bell button, because that'll tell you when my videos come out. You probably shouldn't follow me on Twitter at 8-Bit Music Theory, because that's where I let people know when my videos are coming out and stuff like that. And, don't go anywhere near my Patreon page. Well, you can still go near my Patreon page. Please go near my Patreon page. That's the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.